Testington. Ah, there we go. Baron Testington is here. Not to be confused with Baron Testiculoid, who sounds like this. I used to sound that way before that operation. Well, boy, howdy. I guess I'm going to get us started here. Everything recording, everything going fine.
Yes.
No trouble. Except that I can never remember what I'm supposed to do at these Starwood things. I always end up having to read my own blurb to see what the hell I promised everybody I was going to do. Oh no. This is terrible. It says here, well, first off, the first word is Bob. Praise Bob! You always feel free to say praise Bob, although lately people have been saying hail Bob, and because my hearing aids aren't perfect, I started hearing it as jail Bob. But really, first, if you think about it, you first have to nail Bob. After you finish hailing Bob, you realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't trust preachers and salesmen all the time. Then you've nailed Bob. Then you can jail Bob, but if you're a good subgenius, then you bail Bob. I learned all of that stuff in the comments on the internet earlier today. Okay, so it says here, the title is, Bob Needs Women. Nasty women. To quote our president, in fact. The Bob Needs Women part is a play on of a movie title called Mars Needs Women. But Bob needs specific kinds of women, the nasty kind. And by that I don't mean sexy necessarily, I mean troublesome. These are challenging times for anyone who's not super rich or brain dead, and even a few of those folks are starting to get nervous. On the other hand, if you're both, you can be president. Reverend Stang has some observations and suggestions about maintaining one's sense of slack in a world that looks increasingly like a sick cartoon as the most ridiculous and sketchy of subgenius prophecies are being fulfilled. As a side sermon, Stang will discuss the science of destructionism and how it proves that all holy books of all religions are equally true. And if you're coming from where I'm coming from, that actually doesn't need any more clarification at all. But where that phrase about Bob needs women, nasty women came from is because some nasty women in Austin have decided to make a serious documentary film about the history of the Church of the Subgenius, which started about the same time as Starwood. Well, it became public the same time as Starwood. Like Starwood, it was incubating since the 50s, when we first started getting really, really pissed off, when Mom didn't bring our pacifier in time. And these ladies were doing, they started to have, this is a for real documentary. This time it's really going to happen. They've already spent too much money for it not to. But two women are directing it, and they said, one thing we want to do is help, let's face it, y'all's events look a bit too sausage party still. And I won't deny that, although we're doing better than Devo or Gwar. And it's probably two out of three are guys, and they said they were going to try to change that, and they wanted me to come up with some slogans right off the bat, and Bob Needs Women, Nasty Women was it. It was that simple. Now, some of you I recognize were here at the Puffer Dome. I talked for a little while at the Puffer Dome, and I promised that I would piss people off this time and not necessarily be funny, although I do have some funny stuff on the same subject matter that other people wrote. But first, I have to give you a sad punchline to a lovely story I told in the Puffer Dome. About 2 years ago, I inherited my father's dog, who was a farm dog and had never dealt with city life. He's learning, he's adjusting, and especially he had never met anyone who kept cats as pets. The only cats he ever met were feral cats, varmints. Oh, he hated cats. And during the week of X Day, he was forced to live in the bed and breakfast at the top of the hill. And he could hear us partying down here. Princess Wee had to stay with him then. And I've spent most of Starwood staying with him because he gets so anxious. Mainly because of the cats. He couldn't believe that people were feeding these things and petting them. Don't you understand? They're cats. Well, over a period of time and with a little bit of tough love, he got to where he seemed to not just tolerate the cats, but he wanted to make friends with them. And the cats hadn't gone that far yet. They're tough old cats. But he himself, this dog's name, by the way, is Dammit, with an E. My dad named him. It wasn't a problem way out in the country. It's a little different in the suburbs. Anyway, I was bragging to the people in the Puffer Dome how Starwood was so magical and transformative that this ornery old, and I do mean old dog, had become a kind of a cat lover. And it was such a marvelous little moral of the story, and way to end the rant and get out of there so I could go back to bed. Well, here's the sad thing. Dammit was fooling us, or kidding himself perhaps, because just yesterday I was taking him for a walk in the yard up there, and he came upon one of the cats unexpectedly. It was in a box on the ground. I didn't see it, and suddenly his face was right next to the cat. He instantly grabbed it by the neck and tried to kill it dead right then and there. Right after all that love talk and moaning and loving, tail wagging, I was very fast and got him apart and whooped his butt. And the thing, my good luck and the cats, that the cat was not injured, or I'd be staying at the Super 8 in Athens with that dog now. So in other words, my description of Starwood transforming this beast into a higher being, fake news. On the other hand, though, now this was something else that I got from the newspaper that very morning, and I told everybody about it. It's short. It's the Chattanooga newspaper from Tennessee. It shows the Tennessee license plate with the word "Hail Satan" on it. Hail Satan license plates available in Tennessee. And this is a story, after Tennessee legislators passed a bill to allow residents to get license plates that bear the phrase "In God We Trust," in the interest of religious diversity, other plates were made available that bear other religious phrases, including Shalom, Namaste, Praise Jah, and Hail Satan. Quote, "It's only fair," said State Senator Brody Printrip. "We should celebrate our diversity. Yes, we are deep in the Bible Belt, but the freedom of religion is a constitutionally protected right," said Printrip, holding up a license plate with the phrase, "There's no prob with Bob." Praise Bob. My son was the first one to comment that, "Hey, I noticed on the comments everybody believed that story." Well, I did too. I thought it was real. Today I looked closer, and the Chattanooga Bystander is sort of like the Onion. I fell for it, and here's why. Because I wanted to believe it. It seemed really odd for Tennessee to be a state that would do that, but I wanted to believe it, you know? And somebody thought that I was saying this wrong, but I mean it. Fake news is the news you most want to hear. That's how you know it might be fake news. It's not an instruction, it's a definition. Fake news is the news you most want to hear. And in many cases, it makes money for the people who produce the fake news in the form of clickbait. You can actually, well, I mean, heck, The Onion and other groups I can think of that call themselves churches, sure, they will produce a certain amount of interesting stories to get your attention, and that's how they make their living. But interestingly enough, it has turned out through research that the kind of fake news that right-wingers, conservatives want to hear is the kind that sells the best, by far. And that's why there's a lot more of that out there. Now, of course, a lot of people just assume that, what do you mean fake news? Everybody knows the Clintons are murderers. That's the household internet knowledge. That's been household knowledge on Facebook since 1990, before Facebook was even invented. My mom had every book on the murdering Clintons. I was raised by staunch Republicans, but my dad was a lawyer. He didn't believe any of that crap. He could tell hearsay and gossip when he saw it. He didn't like the Clintons at all, but he knew fake news. However, it does sell. Now, then there was some other news that was probably real news, because you can't write something this dumb even if you're trying. I read the other day that you may have heard of this huge, expensive creationist museum in Kentucky. Taxpayer funded. Oh, the state government in Kentucky decided that, they know enough about this complicated evolution, silly gossip. Let's have some real science. Let's spend taxpayers' money on an enormous creationist museum shaped like Noah's Ark. Well, even the Christians who wanted to like it found it kind of lame, and it's been losing money like crazy. The director of that wonderful project, a guy named Ken Ham, was quoted in the news as saying, well, the reason we failed was because atheists were praying for us to fail. I'll say that one more time. To quote Ken Ham, our creationist museum failed only because atheists were praying for it to fail. Now, stop and think how outnumbered the average atheist is, even in this crowd. I mean, there must be 90 Christians to every 10 atheists, right? If there's even that many atheists. What does this imply? That God listens to the prayers of one atheist harder than he listens to 10 Christians. In other words, nothing responds to prayer better than Jesus does. What the hell does that mean? I come from a secular humanist background, actually. I've never had any real bone to pick with any particular religion. I wasn't beaten by nuns or raped by Catholics or any of that I can remember. I'm a junior scientist, not a real scientist, but I've been a junior scientist my whole life. Admittedly, I am a clown junior scientist, but I've been following the sciences all in a very, very broad way forever, with a specialty lately in microfossils, because I have access to a lot of them. Microfossils are defined as fossils that are smaller than the president's hands or the voters' brains. These are really, really tiny, boring fossils of marine life that are just like most of the ones that are still around today. It's just that I have access to a lot of them. When you know what they look like, you want to hold your breath walking around on that ranch in Texas all the time. So I'm speaking of creation museums. I inherited my dad's house in Texas. It's in an interesting little town. We have a nuclear power plant visible from the dining room window on the horizon, a safari theme park, and dinosaur tracks that the area is famous for, and a creation museum. Pardon me? This creation museum, Dr. Ball's creation museum, is so extreme that even the other creationists think he's a kook. He's got a wonderful track of, his name's Carl Baugh. He's not actually a doctor or anything. He has one of the things in his museum is a dinosaur track with a human track in it. In other words, when the deluge of Noah started, first the Acrocanthosaurus ran across that mud, then Adam or Eve or one of Noah's neighbors ran across it, and so you can clearly see this barefoot human track inside a dinosaur track. He also has one with a sandaled human footprint. They do look strangely sculpted and smooth, much less rough and messed up than your average true lower Cretaceous or even 6,000-year-old track. His whole theory is that the flood came down so hard that in 2 hours it turned all the mud and tracks and bones and shells on the whole planet into solid rock. That's how heavy it was. Now, that was, you might call that fake news. Here's something I read just yesterday that I want to be fake news, but it was one of those big polling outfits, Kennepack, I think. They asked people what they thought of higher education and college. And for the first time, 54% of Republicans said college is bad. You should stop at high school. 54%. Okay, higher education is bad. I guess that's because they've been telling each other for 40 years that if you go to college, every class tells you about Karl Marx and the silly theory of evolution and so forth. I actually only had 2 years of college, and I don't remember any math professor mentioning Marx or communism, or a music teacher mentioning. The film history professor mentioned Groucho Marx and other Marxists. That was all that I got out of it. But in other words, it has come to the point where a little over a quarter of the American population thinks that knowledge is bad. Of course, some people think there's no such thing as knowledge. It's all opinion, and it's all just feelings. I'm not going to try to argue with that because I don't argue religion with people. It just doesn't make any sense. Praise Bob. So, isn't that kind of awful that people would consciously say increased knowledge is a bad thing? Isn't that sort of deplorable? So wasn't Hillary kind of wrong to say half the Trump voters were deplorables? It was 54%. She did later regret saying half. Yeah, slightly over half. Now, what about you secret deplorables? And, what about actually what about you non-deplorable Trump supporters? There are intelligent Republicans. I've known them. Poor William F. Buckley. Good God, he must be rolling over and over in his grave at this point. I didn't agree with him, but he knew what a shift key was for. You know? How far will you secret intelligent Republicans let this go just to piss off us libtards? I've heard the strangest arguments. Well, this was before the election, and these are from some of my best friends. Oh, a vote for Trump is a vote against boredom. Oh, he's an agent of chaos. Okay, number one, no, he's an agent of totalitarian, authoritarian fascism. That's the exact opposite of chaos, you dumbass! And boredom boredom is something to be greatly, greatly welcomed in international politics. The argument was, well, if you vote for Democrat, I mean, let's not even get into those differences. Well, you're just voting for business as usual. Well, as a half college educated country aging white man, I kind of was okay with the way things were going. It seemed like we were making tiny, tiny incremental steps forward, which is all I ever hoped for in practical terms after I grew up a little bit. Well, the president says that PC speech, what we used to call common manners, it was a whole problem. Okay, so I'm going to quit being PC and we'll see who the crybaby special snowflakes are. Because I'm going to use the S word. And for a sub-genius to have to use the S word, that's bad, bad news. Stupid is the S word. For a sub-genius to have to call somebody else stupid. Oh. And ignorance is only a partial excuse. I understand maybe being in a situation where you've never been able to travel much and you never did learn to read much. And besides, Sesame Street was kind of hard to follow. But these people are consciously voting to increase ignorance, like creationism. And to make it, I hate to say it, but I'm starting to feel like they kind of want to outlaw science. In the Church of the Subgenius, we sell, for right over there at that table, among other things, a doctorate in the forbidden sciences. Well, if you're any kind of scientist at all, even an amateur, you're a lawbreaker in this administration's environment. And they are just ignorant. It really is stupid to vote for bigger breaks for the insanely rich and to screw yourself. No skin off my teeth. I'm one of the elites. Relatively. It's not that I have a lot of money in my pocket, but I've got a couple of cars, a little bit of an education. I'm not the one who's going to suffer. So, yeah, I'll say it. The stupid people won. Boy, that hurt my buddy's feelings. I said that at dinner the other day. He was so shocked to hear me say that. I'll say it again. The stupid, buck-toothed, inbred, cow-fucking, jock, redneck, dumbasses won. Does that hurt somebody's feelings? Was that a mean thing for me to say? Are the libtards full of hate? We won't let Ann Coulter get a word in edgewise. Oh, the poor thing. Was I not PC when I said that? It was, hey, come on. It's just locker room banter, that's all. I'm a media star. I can do anything. You should just walk up to the media and grab them by the country. Ha, ha, ha. Locker room banter. And the sad thing about stupid people is they're afraid. They are so afraid. They're afraid. There's Sharia law everywhere. Just look around. Oh, wait. Almost everyone I see looks like an ordinary, normal Caucasian American. Isn't that funny? This tiny smack. No, I don't even see any. Hardly any. Well, some of them count as brown. But, I mean, really, I'm not seeing a whole lot of Sharia law being implemented in Glen Rose, Texas, or Cleveland Heights, Ohio. I currently live in both of those places. Obama took everybody's guns away. The Clintons were executed for murder. There are child sex camps on the moon, even though the moon landing was a hoax. I have heard all of these things over and over and over and over again since I started reading since I started the terrible bad habit of reading the letters to the editor in the Dallas Morning News 100 years ago. But my dad, in the middle of an argument with me that he was not exactly winning, because I wasn't exactly arguing, he uttered something from the bottom of his heart that was one of the truest things I ever heard. He just blurted out, "Well, I believe what I need to believe." That's the human condition. Who among us can really admit that it's any different than that? We all do that. We all believe in what we need to believe. It's just that some people are so screwed up they need to believe that everybody else is too. And I'm not just talking about poor, dumbass, ignorant right-wingers. I'm talking about dumbass, ignorant sub-geniuses. Last week at X Day, there's always one. This time it was the bad listener sub-genius. And he won't be back. Here's what he had to believe. He was in his tent. He couldn't see outside. I guess he doesn't hear in stereo. What he heard was a baby crying real hard and some people chanting something that sounded like they were raping babies. What he actually heard was, in one tent, there a baby had to have a toddler was running around with a stick, having fun, but about to poke his eye out, and his mom took the stick away, and the baby started shrieking. It was late at night, and that's what kids do. On another tent, he heard these hippies that call themselves the bad hoes chanting, "Put it all in your mouth, put it all in your mouth." They were talking about the last piece of cake in another tent. What the bad listener sub-genius heard was child raping in one tent. That was what his mind interpreted these two completely innocent things as being. He also saw a dad sitting next to a kid in one of those golf carts, and the dad's hands were furtively moving down in his lap. Well, he was changing film, or putting batteries in his camera, I mean. But that's not what the bad seeing sub-genius saw. He saw somebody jacking off with a kid next to him, and he called the sheriff about both of those incidents and caused all kinds of stink. But the main thing he did was get himself booted out of. Again, think how dumb you have to be kicked out of Church of the Sub-Genius for being dumb. And then there was my dildo bomb last year. I had this camera mount that it was a very weird looking thing, and it didn't actually work as a camera mount. That was fake news too. It had rounded ends. I fell out of the golf cart, and as I was looking for it, I started getting reports from security over the walkie-talkie as I tried to track it down. A guy tended to see it as a roadside bomb. Women tended to see it as a dildo that had just been used and was gross and they weren't going to touch it. So yeah, you believe what you need to believe. And if I wanted to get rich real quick, all I would have to do is repeat the sub-genius bullshit without smiling. If I could keep a straight face when I went through all of Bob's wonderful sayings, that too much is always better than not enough, pull the wool over your own eyes, there's conspiracy of normal people taking away the slack of all the abnormals, and you're better than others just because you're different. Isn't that just what you most wanted to hear? Doesn't that sound like it might be fake news? Maybe. There are people who honestly want to believe that they are a different species than the humans, and therefore they're better. The really stupid ones actually think they're smarter than everybody else. How do you even define intelligence? If you've got half a brain, you know that's impossible. Book smart, and you can't change a tire? Well, Mensa might be the place for you. If you can do both, Church of the Sub-Genius might work out. If you can just change a tire, that's all we ask. Phooey, that's what I say. Mark my words, phooey. I know that's strong language. I don't want to break anybody's ears. Oh, and then there's the mainstream media. That's the bad guy now because it might say news you didn't want to hear. Oh my God, it must be a lie if it isn't exactly what you wanted to hear. Here's the thing, I actually have worked in and out of the mainstream media and of course the underground media. I've spent most of my time doing college radio and fun stuff where I didn't have advertisers, didn't have a boss, could basically do anything I wanted to except say the one true rule of the Church of the Subgenius plainly on the radio, which is, if they can't take a joke. There, I just saved myself some work. Anyway, sure, there's bias there. I've actually worked as a journalist a little bit, although I wasn't ever trained that way, and I've worked as a typesetter and an office boy and a cameraman around regular news stations and big city magazines and all that kind of stuff. And they're not sitting around trying to make up lies. They're trying to compete with their competition by getting better proof sooner. Of course there's bias, mostly driven by advertising. And of course there's, you got your Breitbart on the one hand, or your Raw story perhaps on the other hand. I have the bad habit of reading both, my friends. I don't watch TV news. I've never actually seen The Daily Show. I've never seen a Daily Show. I've seen a little clip. I saw a clip of Rachel Maddow the time she mentioned Bob Dobbs. I saw Stephen Colbert the time he looked like Bob Dobbs. But basically, I don't use cable TV, and I prefer to read in the news because then I can get it at my own speed. There's more sentences there, more information. I can go through it faster than any news guy can talk, and I've spent more time in the right-wing bubble than most right-wing bubbleheads have. I know about echo chambers. I know about both sides of the echo chambers. You believe what you want to believe, but there is such a thing as truth, but it's not simple. And people want simple. They really want simple. And when you simple it down, it's not truth anymore. Truth is complicated. It's like slack versus false slack. Sure, you can say, whoa, false slack. Well, no, I'm not getting real slack. But I got lots of false slack, and false slack's better than no slack at all. No! False slack is no slack at all! And when you say, oh, well, these are just alternate facts. No! Alternate facts are no facts at all. There are such things as correct and incorrect. I didn't say right and wrong. Those are human conceits that will change from person to person. But some things can be measured. But my friend across the dinner table from me, he couldn't get over me saying, the stupid ones won this time, just face it. They were tired of the black president and women bosses. That's what it boiled down to. Well, later that night, because we were in the same motel room, my friend started in on the same lines I've been hearing for 20 years. Yeah, but in the 70s, this Paul Ehrlich guy, he wrote this book that said global cooling was going to destroy the world in 10 years. Science is wrong. Science is always wrong. They're always having to correct themselves. Yeah, that's the general idea about science. That's why it's not a religion. They're constantly admitting they're wrong. Of course, it's slow, because scientists live a long time, and they cling to their ideas, and they have egos just like everybody else. But yeah, that is the general idea. They find out they're wrong, and then they admit it. Good God! Oops. Anyway, oh God, tried to watch a video today. It was coming in too slow because the Wi-Fi. It was a Christian creation science video, and I couldn't watch it, but I read the description. It said, dinosaurs aren't real, because fossils are just rocks. They're not really bones. I didn't care about that part. She couldn't even spell dinosaurs. It was spelled like a sore on your arm. Thunder sores. God. Okay, here's another funny thing. Racism. All of a sudden, whoa, it's just cool to be a racist again. At least on the internet, where you're still anonymous and a whole lot of big old brave white boys getting together on the internet with fake names to be racist. Racism, of course, is a loser's excuse for being a loser. I personally think loser is a nasty word. We're all losers. We're all gonna die, every single one of us. Some of us know how to make our way through this short life and be graceful losers. Racists are just the very bad losers. They've got to have something to blame it on. Oh, but Stang, you're an elite in an ivory tower. Yeah, and I'm also a gun-owning small business owner who lives on a goat ranch in rural Texas. I'm an elite, all right. Yeah, I read a couple of nonfiction books a month at least, preferably every week. I've been to China and Africa working, not just as a tourist, all over Europe and really all over the United States. I lived for 25 years in a low-income, mostly Mexican neighborhood in Dallas. And then the last 20 years I lived in a mostly black neighborhood that is middle class and is in fact probably the safest, most welcoming neighborhood I've ever lived in. Not everybody's black. There's also a lot of artists, Hasidic Jews, queers of every stripe, Russians. For some reason, unlike the way they describe it on the internet, everybody gets along fine. The people in small town Texas read about the big city crime. And they think, oh, people in big city are also unfriendly. They're Muslims are going to take over. And, oh, it's just, we better. And meanwhile, the people in the big cities going, including me, for a long time, are going, oh my God, the Texas state government, Jesus, I could never live there. They're insane. And they just passed this open carry laws that they're all gunslingers now. Well, all of those are stereotypes. They did pass the open carry law in Texas and nothing happened because everybody was already packing. They always had been. They just didn't have to brag about it. The only ones that had to brag about it are the scared dumb shits. My brother and sister and I, after the open carry thing was passed, a month later, we discussed it, and among the three of us, we had seen one person toting her 6 gun out on her hip, and it was an old lady. Most of the stores had signs up that said, please don't carry your open carry weapon in here. It makes people nervous. And no one did, because like I say, I mean, in a rural area, yeah, most people are packing. I need to get a pistol myself because of rattlesnakes. But yeah, it works both ways. I mean, most of those people in small towns, they're not ignorant. They're not all ignorant. And they really are really friendly. They might be a little standoffish if you had a hope and change button on, but we've gotten to be good friends with our neighbors. The reason they don't like Trump is because they like Ted Cruz better. So, go figure. Anyway, my point is the internet backfired. It spreads simple lies so much faster than complex truths. I used to think TV was worse, but it's not really, because TV is still somewhat controlled on the internet. No matter what idiotic, hateful thing you want to believe, you can find a million other people instantly with plenty of proof of it. So, yeah. We're going to need a bigger lie. A big lie. I guess, if we're going to fight fire with fire. I've never seen anything this dumb, but I've seen so many extremely dumb things happen, I'm not a bit surprised that things could get dumber. Think of those poor Jews in late 1930s Germany going, oh, that guy's a clown. He's not gonna, nobody takes that crap seriously. What's gonna happen? And that was one of the most civilized, knowledgeable countries on the planet Earth. Possibly more so than this one. It can happen here. And I'm sorry I'm not being funny, but we can't go quietly into that dark night of tax returns. We've got to rebel rouse and shout like hell before we get Stockholm Syndrome, you know, where you're taken hostage and you can't handle the fear and the humiliation, so you automatically start to love your captors. Oh, there were so many clues. They were right in front of us. For instance, Kellyanne Conway, the first woman to run a successful presidential campaign. But look at her name. Conway. The conspiracy hiding in plain sight. And then there was Hillary, one of the lizard aliens, bragging openly about how she was going to expose the gray alien UFO conspiracy. They had to replace her with one of their own puppets. It's all part of the Greys versus the Lizard secret alien overlord mob war. And it's all in Subgenius Prophecy. You can read about this crap in a 1983 book with the word humor on the back cover, telling the librarian where to put it. And we've been trying to look at the bright side. I told my friend Reverend Pease, oh, we'll keep doing the Hour of Slack radio show, even from the concentration camps. He said, oh, we call those patriot camps, Reverend Stang, and they're not going to be that bad. We'll get snacks. But more likely they'll be called Trump Towers, I think. Prisons and public housing will be merged and just all called Trump Towers, and people who score low in citizen points by not turning in enough of their fellow citizens for treason or pot smoking will have to pay much higher rent than those with good American scores, especially the Trump youth who report on college radio stations that break the new patriotism rules. You know, if you criticize the government, that's exactly the same as terrorism, and it's going to have the same penalties, hanging, or else having to work at Trump stop for the rest of your life. Everybody will be, by the way, that policy I just described is happening in China right now. Everybody will want to be a good American, just like those good Germans we all heard about. Again, I'm not worried. I'm one of the elites. Well, I am worried. We had a hope, right after the election, like a lot of people, I felt like I knew it could happen because I had been living in the bubble, and I knew that people who had never voted in their whole lives were going to vote for the first time. And a lot of people who probably would have voted went, no, I don't like what she did to Bernie, so I'm just, Well, the hope was maybe Trump's really a closet surrealist, like that comedian Andy Kaufman. You know, he said years ago that if he was going to run for president, he'd do it as a Republican because, as he put it, they're so easy to fool. And so we got to thinking, maybe his whole plan was to convince the deplorables that he was really just one of them, a rich real estate developer, and then once he got in, totally blow their minds with really cool surrealist laws, like all dogs must wear top hats and little bow ties, or car tires shall henceforth be made of titanium steel, but the rest of the car shall be made of rubber. Daylight savings time shall be held on alternating days. Free Adderall for redheads. Christmas every month. Only Christians will have access to pornography or death metal. Every 10th Jack-in-the-Box will be armed with explosives. Vaccinations will be available by lottery, but will be required for those chosen randomly. If global warming continues, we will build a wall around the earth and make God pay for it. All subgeniuses must wear collars with bells on them. No farting except by heads of state. All diapers shall be small Confederate battle flags, but with Pokemon characters added. And North and South Korea will be deported to opposite sides of the moon with the North Koreans facing away. So, but that would have been kind of cool. Then I could agree, yeah, he's an agent of chaos, but that it's turning out to be just the opposite. And I only have 10 more minutes, and I have to get out of here because the incoming bans are complicated, like the truth. But I do have a couple of statements that some subgeniuses who are feeling a little funnier than I was about all this said, that I collected off the internet. That very young guy, Dr. Shogoth, said, friends, loved ones, and country folks, you can't hashtag your way out of this. Donald Trump is your president. That's democracy. You can't protest an election away. Put down your hashtags. Shit is going to get weird. We've been through weird. We've been training all our lives, dear mutants, to resist and uphold our integrity against a society that increasingly insists on conformity. We are the faithful who have trained for this exact moment. This is not the time to panic and give in to despair. This is what all of our conversations led to, like the spring of love and hate and weirdness that wits were made for. We can come out of this shit better than when we went into it. This situation was made by chaos, and we know chaos. This is a medium we can work in, and our enemies were fools for handing this to us. Stay strong, chippies. When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. Or kill me. Another friend of mine, G. Gordon Gordon, who moved to Portugal after the election, said, I know a lot of my Yeti kin are totally bummed, but look at it this way, the ones who have the most invested in the system will suffer the most when Shiteheel wrecks it. They'll be the pinks, so lean back, light up, and enjoy the circus. After all, we still have slack, we and we alone will prevail. We've never believed in all that government bullshit anyway. And there are more places for you to buy frop or grow it legally. I hope. And when the Trumpkins find out they've been conned because Shiteheel can't possibly give them all the things they want, the fun will be even bigger. And this Norwegian said, our betters up at the castle, who have spent the past 60 years wishing they could order summary execution of anyone who even looks funny at the unholy first-use nuclear alliance, are severely embarrassed and freaking the fuck out. I do not like the phrases freaking the fuck out and first-use nuclear alliance to apply to anywhere on the same planet as me. Thank you very much. And this last one by the good Reverend Roger. I read a rant by him last, Starwood. And this one's funny too. I have no ass and I must shit is the name of it. By the good Reverend Roger. For the first time in my long and wretched life, I'm stumped. I'm watching the rolling dumpster fire that is the Trump administration, and I can't rant about it because I don't know where to start. There are so many things to bray laughter at that I keep starting to spout, but then something else comes along and I get derailed. Now, I normally do not soil myself with human politics, but it's impossible to avoid this time around. The moment you turn on the TV or the internet, an avalanche of raw sewage pours out and ruins the carpet. It's like a production line making assholes, one right after another, and there's no getting away from it. So I've stopped trying, and so I'm going to do my part to push this bad puppy right off the cliff. This is not a time to keep a straight face, and life is going to be very, very hard on those who are not serious about having a good time. And I plan on having a very good time indeed. Who can blame me? Actual no bullshit Nazis are coming out of the woodwork thinking their day has come. The hills are alive with the sound of hayseeds and Klan members screeching and touching themselves in triumph. But the funny thing is, even though their guy won, nothing is working out for him. The Senate is a tangled mess, the courts are publicly urinating on executive orders, and the people who voted for Trump are devouring themselves, spitting out bits of their own skin as they proclaim that America is going to be great again. It is. You just watch. Never mind that people in Kentucky don't look happy at their victory, or West Virginia, or the suddenly impoverished cattle kings in Texas and New Mexico. Never mind that some po-buckers are starting to mumble about their health care as if they suddenly realize that all the things Trump said apply to them too, and this is real, not just showing those liberals a thing or two. Richard Spencer got a flying elbow to the jaw, and the alt-right started asking where the liberal tolerance went. But we were all too busy laughing to listen. A long time ago, a few crusty old subgeniuses talked about, quote, the coming weird times. Well, those times are here now, and they're going to get a lot weirder. I'm okay with that. I'm on the crazy train with the primates, making choo-choo noises while the boiler overheats, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Well, almost anything. I'd kind of like my aging parents to have health insurance and all that good stuff, but since that isn't going to happen, why not roll the state down the stairs just to hear it crash? I've become an unrepentant wrecker, and I make no apologies for it. This is, after all, what 61 million people demanded. They, being the idiotic hominids that they are, wanted an administration that would pay attention to them. Be careful what you wish for, stupid humans. This is exactly why you can't have nice things. But you and I, we're Yeti, we're subgeniuses, and we will not be governed. We wobble, we oscillate. When you crush us in the fist of the state, we just sort of ooze out between its fingers and dance off down the street, laughing and happy slapping passing po-buckers. They may have 2 million people under arms and twice that many police, but we have Bob. They may have the banks, we have Slack. They may have 12 aircraft carriers, but we have Dr. Legume and G. Gordon Gordon, even if they had to leave the country for reasons best left unspoken. Orton Nenslow once said that if you, quote, freak the mundanes, unquote, they'll find ways to make sure you'll wish you were never born. But they're doing that anyway, so why not take them with us? Why not skip merrily along into the apocalypse with your pants full of shit and a stupid grin on your face? Anyway, that's why I can't rant anymore or kill me, says the good Reverend Roger. You notice that's 2 rants by subgeniuses that ended with the line, or kill me. And I'm going to end this, having not told you anything at all about the Church of the Subgenius. You don't want to know. Oh, you don't want to know. The last thing you want to do is spend that $35 and become a minister and be able to go to the secret websites. Oh, you don't want to do that. I do have a couple of new quotes. And they're actually not Bob quotes, they're all me quotes. Here's the first one. If I don't already know about it, then it isn't cool enough for me to know about. Boy, that one pisses people off. Aging. It's just like turning into the Wolfman, only it's the mummy you're transforming into every full noon. And then the last one is, inside this confident seeming skinny old hippie is an incredibly insecure fat nerd screaming to get out. That probably describes a whole lot of my friends too. And with that, friends, I must say thank you for coming to another Starwood. We'll be here again next year unless the new Subgenius prophecy works out and the world ends on 5-7 instead of 7-5. Apparently the 1998 was a phone number. We'll figure it out. We'll still be waiting for the saucers at Wisteria. And praise Bob. Well, we can't do the Q&A. There's usually a Q&A, and usually I go through this thing and read funny workshop titles, but they weren't all that funny except this one that was early on, honoring the sacred yoni. Oh, just walk up and grab him. Yeah. So thank you, friends, and our sales table is over there. There will be a Q&A at the sales table, but every answer will end with the phrase, only $1. Thank you, and praise Bob.